in this episode with Sophie-Maude.
But it never really became a problem until I was at school. Just OCD getting more severe, and with the anxiety, it started to affect my mood, like after school hours, and just being angry and anxious and upset all the time. Just because being undiagnosed at that point, it meant that I struggled because my brain obviously processes and learns things different to other people's brains. So when I was in a classroom and had a teacher teaching me a certain way, to how my brain isn't really react to that kind of learning, it was stressful because it was extra pressure, just because I wasn't really retaining any information and it was holding me back. So I guess that's like how it affected me, but it was more so as I started to get older in school, like 8 or 9, that's when it was like a real issue because it got in the way of making friends. And then also as like word got about that I had Tourette's and OCD, then people in the class would, try and make me tick or try and trigger my OCD, so then that became a big thing. And then in the end I got taken out of school, both my the child younger than me, the middle child, and we started homeschooling, and then that's when I started to get out of my shell again a bit more. Started to learn the way that I learn, our brains learn. So yeah, that was cool. Don't get me wrong, I love standing on a stage with everyone looking at me, but there's nothing I love more than songwriting with my producer in like studio, and then having like our friend who also does songwriting, like things like that, how there's just a bunch of minds getting creative. But when it's every single day, it's keeping you at like a certain level of being like knocked down, and the impacts can be like crazy. Like obviously that added to my anxiety, and when my anxiety's worse, it makes my OCD worse, which makes my Tourette's worse because it's all like connected. It got to the point where we had to be taken out of school, obviously. When I was about 7 or 8, I was diagnosed with OCD, and then when I was about 7 with OCD, 8 with Tourette's. It took years to get a ASD, an autism diagnosis. It was probably like 13 or 14, and then I was recently diagnosed with ADHD about a year ago, which you'd think would be the first thing diagnosed.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
But with that comes accessibility to medication that you might need. For me, ADHD meds is the change of life itself. Like I wouldn't be able to sit here and have a conversation with you if I didn't take my meds.
Sophie, you are a singer-songwriter, and from what I've read and what I've seen and what I've listened to, a pretty good one, on the rise, which is fantastic. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And we'll get to that in more detail, but I'd like to, if I can, go back a little bit to your childhood and talk about talk about who you were character-wise as a young person, what it was like growing up for you, your family, where you lived, just so that we've got a little bit of context as to who
Cool.
Sophie is and where you've come from. Is that all right?
Yeah. So I grew up in a really, really nice big house in Bethlehem. So kind of like the family dream. Had a like really nice lifestyle block. I had a lot of freedom in just, space and loads of friends growing up. Um, but my life was pretty ruled by OCD, so severe, obsessive compulsive disorder and Tourette's and ADHD and stuff like that. So it was pretty interesting adding it into the mix. But honestly, like, despite all that, I still look back and like, I actually do miss my childhood because it still was separate from the OCD and the other challenges. I was given like a really good childhood. So I still look back and I see the happy memories, but then aside from that, I also see like the challenges that wasn't just for me, but my whole family and also my siblings that grew up with their own challenges and diagnoses and however you say
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
yeah.
So how many siblings have you got?
I have 2 younger brothers.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
So were you the boss?
Nah, it's always the middle child. It's always the middle child.
All right. So you grew up in Bethlehem, and so what were some of the happy memories? What were some of the things that you remember that might have shaped who you become?
Well, we had a big pool, so we always used to have the neighborhood kids come over and we'd ride our bikes. We were really lucky to be in like it was like a section of houses, so it was like a private. You'd go down the driveway and there was all these big houses with gardens all round in a circle, and so all the kids and I would always like get our bikes and drive around, bike around like the driveways and stuff like that. Yeah, so it was really cool. All your best friends live really close to you. So it was really cool growing up, just constantly having friends to hang out with. I guess most people have that growing up, but it was really cool just having like a bunch of friends that all lived so close by to you. So that was definitely like a big part of my childhood. Yeah, and we'd always have family like parties at our house, like New Year's Eve parties and stuff like that. So it was always loads of people in the house, loads of animals. We'd have like chickens, pet chickens that would sometimes come in our house and sit on our knee while we'd like eat breakfast and stuff like that. Loads of doves and ducks and fish and frogs, animals like cats and dogs. Yeah, so always loads of things going on.
Sounds really cool.
Yeah,
that's good. And so, what were you like as a child? Were you shy and introverted, or were you a bit out there and extroverted?
Mom, you're probably better to answer that question. I don't know. I was I think as a child, I had no boundaries. That probably came with the ADHD and being on the spectrum. But if I didn't like something, I'd say it. But I don't think I was a difficult child. Maybe as I got a little bit older. But I remember once I was very out there and expressive. I wasn't shy at all. But then when it got to school, I kind of caved in and I was very much goody two shoes and didn't even say anything, let alone speak back to the teacher. So I think that's kind of when I started to get back in my shell. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and you talked about ADHD and your sort of conditions or disorders, whatever is the right word for that. Forgive me. When did that sort of become a factor or a feature? When did you or your family know that was what you were dealing with or what they were dealing with as well, I suppose? When did that come about?
Well, my mum's got a background in nursing, so she picked a lot of this stuff up when I was about 3 years old. But it never really became a problem until I was at school. Just OCD getting more severe, and with the anxiety, it started to affect my mood, like after school hours, and just being angry and anxious and upset all the time. just because being undiagnosed at that point, it meant that I struggled because my brain obviously processes and learns things different to other people's brains. So when I was in a classroom and had a teacher teaching me a certain way, to how my brain isn't really react to that kind of learning, it was stressful because it was extra pressure. Just because I wasn't really retaining any information and it was holding me back. So I guess that's like how it affected me, but it was more so as I started to get older in school, like 8 or 9. That's when it was like a real issue because it got in the way of making friends. And then also as like word got about that I had Tourette's and OCD, then people in the class would, try and make me tick or try and trigger my OCD. So then that became a big thing. And then in the end, I got taken out of school. Both my the child younger than me, the middle child, and I, we started homeschooling, and then that's when I started to get out of my shell again a bit more. Started to learn the way that I learn, our brains learn. So
Yeah.
that was cool.
So, I mean, Mum being a nurse and being able
Yeah.
to spot things early on was probably an advantage, because I imagine
100%.
there's a lot of people who would be on the spectrum and just not know it.
The amount of people I meet every day, like my mum and I always laugh because we can just see someone walking and we'll like self-diagnose them on the spot, like, yeah, definitely on the spectrum, just the way they're walking. But no, the amount of people that they have no idea that the reason that they struggle or they can't focus is literally just because their brain is wired a little different. But yeah, it's just, I think, a lack of overall knowledge on how it actually affects people instead of just the stereotypes can have a lot to do with it. But I think these days it's becoming a whole lot more well known. I wouldn't say common because it's just more people are picking up that they have things as opposed to more people having ADHD or OCD. It's just people actually realizing it in themselves.
Yeah, so an increased awareness of it and knowledge of it, so that, like you say, it's not necessarily that there's more of it. We just know it exists.
Yeah, exactly.
And knowing is, I would imagine, is half of the battle, if that's the right word. I suppose if you don't know that your child has got a disorder of any kind, then how do you help support and manage them?
Yeah, and also exactly not acknowledging what it is, then you can't really treat it, if you like.
Or understand.
Yeah, exactly.
Just understand.
Both my parents, both of them are on the spectrum, and when they were younger, it like affected either their learning or their ability to cope and socialize and stuff like that in school. But back then it was considered behavior or stupidity or something like that if they're not learning the way that they were being taught. But yeah.
Yeah, I suppose like the stereotypes, and you've mentioned that word, I think, already.
What's that, sorry?
The stereotypes, of around that kind of stuff. People, I think, kids especially, who trying to think way back to my childhood, too far back, but
would be here for hours.
Thinking about how you view people who are different, but as you grow older, you realize everyone's different, and actually being different, it's almost better to be different than to be one of a crowd, right?
I'm so glad I'm on the spectrum because I look at people my age that have literally like molded into what you're supposed to be in society, and it's just so boring. Like, oh my gosh, like I can actually allow myself and be comfortable myself to be quirky and weird and like laugh and have a good time with my friends. But someone my age that might like be like, oh no, that's too weird, like to be that open with my friends, like, you know what I mean? Like, I just love it. I love having a different perspective on life because I'll just like, I might be outside staring at like an ant or a moth or something, and I'll just like staring at it for like 10 minutes. I'm just like amazed by it. But then someone else that might not be on the spectrum, it's a moth, that's an ant,
or they might not even see it.
Yeah, I just love how I see the world and how I process color and things around me. It's just so much more bright and happy to me. I guess I'm naturally a happy person, but a lot of that has to do with, how hard it was growing up with being on the spectrum and stuff. And now that it's nowhere near as complicated, I'm just happy to be alive.
Yeah.
Seeing things.
So I suppose, Sophie, is there an element of, once you're being diagnosed, it's helpful to you because then you know that your perspective might be slightly different. Can you think back to when you were a child, maybe, and you weren't diagnosed or didn't necessarily know what you know today? Was that difficult? Being different, and I'm using the word different within inverted commas here, but how people might see you as being different, but you might feel different or might struggle to understand why people have got their attitudes that they've got.
Yeah, and I mean, like, obviously you were treated different too in school, not just by students, but very much by teachers as well. I think when I was at school, and definitely when my parents and you guys were at school, there was a very much a lack of understanding and compassion because people would view it as behavior. Yeah, but definitely in like people my age, because I knew that I was different, but I didn't really think that there was anyone else that was like me, if you like. So it was very much a isolation kind of thing, and I think that's why in school I did kind of creep into my shell, just having students and teachers not understand, and so they'd treat you different, or they'd get frustrated if you weren't actually learning. And because I was so shy and I was like a goody two shoes, like I would hate to have all eyes on me or the teacher pull me aside and get angry at me. Like I'd hate that. But obviously, because I wasn't able to learn anything and retain anything, it did frustrate like people around me. But now that I know everything, I don't know, I just like love myself so much more because not many people my age or any age can like understand themselves and embrace themselves and actually like are glad to be who they are. And I also like, you know, I've got a lot of people that are a bit younger than me that also have the same struggles that are able to look up to me and be like, oh, yo, like she actually likes who she is. But I didn't have that. So the fact that I'm able to do that, like for other people, is like really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Been a role model, yeah. There's something you were talking about there that got me thinking about, the need for us to understand. I've doing some writing at the minute, and in a different kind of space, we do a lot of work on leadership and. To be a leader, really, to be a good leader, you need to understand people that you work with so that you can help provide them and support them in being the best that they can be. And the first part of that is to understand yourself, because you can't understand others if you can't understand yourself. And it seems to me that, from what you were saying there, you've got this kind of opportunity now to go through life. You do understand yourself. You can embrace that and use that as a positive as opposed to it being a struggle.
Yeah, 100%.
Going forward. Yeah. I just wonder whether, just thinking again out loud, I told you about this, didn't I?
Yeah, I'm the same.
Thinking out loud here about, I wonder how many kids, are undiagnosed on the spectrum somewhere, shape or form. Might be struggling at school, might be seen as behavioural issues, How much easier would it be for children at school, and how much easier would it be for teachers if we all knew a bit more about each other?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And I think that applies to everything in life. Like, that's so true. Definitely with like the needing to understand each other and the compassion that comes with that. But also when it has like a lack of understanding about other people and yourself, I feel like when there's positions of power, sometimes ego can come into place as well when there's not understanding for people below you. So, I don't know, just throwing stuff out there, but yeah. So I can't remember exactly.
So if you go back to when were you diagnosed formally?
When I was about 7 or 8, I was diagnosed with OCD, and then when I was about 7 with OCD, 8 with Tourette's. It took years to get a ASD, an autism diagnosis. I was probably like 13 or 14, and then
Right.
I was recently diagnosed with ADHD about a year ago, which
Okay.
you'd think would be the first thing diagnosed.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
But with that comes accessibility to medication that you might need. For me, ADHD meds is the change of life itself. Like,
Right.
I wouldn't be able to sit here and have a conversation with you if I didn't take my meds.
Okay. What would that be like then? Just out of interest, what would it be like if you weren't?
Yeah,
on
I'd
your
just not be
medication?
able to process any questions being said to me. It would all go in one ear and out the other without retaining any information. And with that, I wouldn't be able to have an answer. And even if I did have an answer for something, I start to trail off once I've started like saying the first sentence. I forget what the question was, and then I forget what the answer is. And that's what it was like at school for me. It's what it's been like for my whole life until last year or the year before that when I started medication. So yeah, it's good now because I can actually do things like songwriting and multitasking, which I wasn't able to do before. So yeah.
So is that forgive my ignorance?
No.
So is that purely a concentration thing? You cannot concentrate on something long
Yeah.
enough to, like you say, to listen to the
It's a
question and
few
formulate an
things.
answer.
Yeah, concentration, definitely. Processing is a big thing. And just retaining information. Yeah, just like by the time you've retained something, you've forgotten again, you know?
Yeah. So you can see how that would be a massive problem at school.
Yeah, and everyday life, trying to have conversations with people. Yeah, so true.
Yeah. So what about, if you don't mind sharing, what about some of the other symptoms that,
Yeah.
like with Tourette's and, so again, maybe I'll ask a question first before that. So ASD, autistic spectrum disorder, is that right? I've got that right? Something like that?
Is it? Yeah, I've got, I don't know.
So, and so is that something separate, or is that what the umbrella under which Tourette's and OCD come under?
I think because everything on the spectrum is connected anyway. I haven't met someone that has ADHD that doesn't have maybe like an anxiety tic, or somebody with OCD that doesn't have ADHD, and someone, you know, it's so on. It's all the spectrum, and it's this one big like blur, like this one merge, and there's so many parts of the spectrum that it's not like a category, but people have to kind of categorize it so that you can get a diagnosis and things like that, break it down a little. Yeah, for me, I guess it is like my personality. Somebody might choose to be quiet when they've met someone new, but for me, I have to go up like, "Hi, I'm Sophie, what's your neighbor?" That would be like the ASD side of me, because I kind of don't care and I want to get out there, whereas someone else might think, oh, that's like socially a bit weird, or, you know, so, but I like having that confidence that comes with it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I would see it. I mean, when you arrived here
Yeah.
today, I just saw a confident person walk in,
Cool. I'm
you know?
glad.
So it just comes across that way.
That's good, because when I was a bit younger, it was like really bad because I didn't know like lines of boundary, and this is for everyone with ASD. Sometimes people learn, like I did, what lines you don't cross in society, but a lot of people don't ever learn those lines. For me, when I was like 14, like I wouldn't know when to stop talking or when to stop being weird or things like that. But it did get me in a lot of trouble because obviously friends and stuff like that, I couldn't really make friends that weren't on the spectrum who also didn't know those boundaries. But I'm actually really grateful for those experiences, because now I can still, get through everyday life fine when it comes to social stuff, because I do know those boundaries. So I don't, I don't feel restrained, because as a person, I never restrain myself, but I'm able to like keep myself calm and cool through like experiences in life where I have to have like a professional side to me, which is really good. I was going to say something else, but I can't remember.
That's all good. That's all good. So I was going to say in relation to that, which I've almost forgot. Bear with me. See, happens to me too.
I've got some meds in my bag, mate.
Good on you. I was going to say about your ability to be able to explain, your character, and how your perspective and how you see the world and the things that are going on for you. Your openness, willingness to share that is removing, I would imagine, what would be barriers for a lot of people who weren't prepared to share.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
then people can't understand.
Yeah.
They only form perspectives based on what they know, and if they don't know enough, they'll get it wrong. So your ability to be able to share like that means the whole world can be your friend, right? Because everyone can understand
hopefully.
you. Yeah.
I mean, you learn pretty fast people that are very close off and don't want to have anything to do with you when you're open, but that way it's so much easier because then you can just move on to the next person.
Yeah, exactly. They're not worth having as friends, right?
Yeah. And then like part of me naturally as a person, I'm very like sometimes I can take things to heart. Like recently I had this car like driving up my ass, and obviously this was just before I like did my restricted test, and I could not believe that this guy who was in like his 30s or 40s had a passenger, was going up my ass with my learner's plate on. Got to a point where I had to like illegally pull over because I was so like scared about it. Flipped me off. And I was driving fast. Had a little cry about it that night because I have to take things personally sometimes. But so sometimes when I'm like, oh, like that person clearly like doesn't like how open I am, part of me is like, why? Like that's so lame. Like why are you so closed off? But then I'm just like, oh well, that's like good as somebody else. So sometimes I can be like take things personally because it's not how I see the world. I get so confused how people can just so easily like judge people or have be mean. Like you know what I mean? It's not how I see the world. But then like I'm just like, oh, I'll move on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think we're all made of the same stuff, aren't we? But we're structured kind of differently. And the thing is, I think everybody's different every day.
Yeah.
So we don't know, what's going on for them either. They don't know what's going on for you.
Exactly.
You don't know what's going on for them. They could have had a really bad day.
They could be on the spectrum for all we know.
Well, we don't know. There could be anything going on for them. So I think it's a case of not, it's all right for me to say this, but I've learned this over the years. I'm sharing this with you now because, I used to take things really to heart too and personal. And so what I've learned to do is realize that actually I don't know what's going on for them.
Yeah.
It's not about me. It's about them.
That's the best
thing
you can
move on
do.
from it.
Yeah, because then it has, even if you don't know what's going on, there's still a level of understanding and compassion because it doesn't matter everyone in the world that's like really shitty or is negative or anything. Like it doesn't matter. Like there would have been some reason that they're like that. Doesn't matter what it is, so they have something going on.
Absolutely.
And you just have to like understand with compassion, move on until they're ready to like, get better or whatever, have a better day. But there's no point getting negative at it because then it's just adding to that energy, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I want to go back a little bit if I can, and there's a reason for this because it's sort of leading to you being homeschooled. But if we can just like touch on what we're talking about here, but back at school. So you were diagnosed with some aspects when you were at school. If I'm right, you were 7,
the
right?
last year and a half of school.
Yeah. So given that you were diagnosed, and I'm sure that would have been communicated with your teachers and to some of your schoolmates at least. What was your experience of school, people understanding that and, having empathy for that or understanding for that?
Well, I'm going to start off and say my understanding now is that teachers are a lot better in schools and that they want to help and they're wanting to understand kids, which is really good, like from what I've heard. But when I was at school, it definitely wasn't that way, not for me. My brother and everyone else I know that's had to homeschool. A lot of it came from like ignorance, just lack of understanding came with like opinions. Even people that were, supposed to be around kids with disabilities, just having such a lack of understanding on how to cope with it, how to deal with it, and how to help a child with it couldn't be more wrong. So it made life at school literally hell, like not just for me but for my parents when we had to come home like in such a like anxious, shitty mood because I'm finally out. Like, again, it couldn't be worse. Like, I still look back and I think like, jeepers, like after all that school training, you actually wonder how people, didn't understand. But I think now that there's a lot more knowledge about it and a lot more people that are realizing traits in themselves, that it's more normalized. Everyone's on a spectrum. It's just what like part of the spectrum and how much, like everyone has little OCD things. Like my mum has to check that she's locked the doors every night and make sure she hasn't left the oven on. It's just how obsessive they become and how like many stuff you have. But everyone's on a spectrum. It's just how much it impacts their daily lives. For me, like I still struggle because I have the ASD and on top of that the ADHD and on top of that the OCD. They all contribute to it. For me, with my ADHD, I'll forget. Like someone has to remind me to brush my teeth. Someone has to remind me to shower, remind me to get up because I've got something going on. And that's usually my mum. Because I forget, like with daily routine, I don't remember. Like I have to be reminded. And then with the OCD, that's a completely different element. Like once I'm in the shower, all these little OCD habits are like triggering me. So I'm having to like, now I fight against them, which means that they don't get worse and worse and worse, which is what happened when I was younger. But, growing up before I had the ability to fight back, we had to like hire like care workers and stuff to help me get up and get showered and get dressed, take me out in public places, just because of how severe everything was. But now that I have the ability to like do a lot of things myself, I don't know. Yeah, I'm just like really glad that I don't have like my life completely controlled, but it makes me more like happy as a person. And I don't know, I guess.
So is it fair to say, Sophie, I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but
Mhm.
so this stuff's still there for you, but you're more in control of it now rather than it controlling you.
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
yeah, and it'll always be there for me. That's been something that's taken ages to accept. Even recently now, because it got to a point, like up to like 6 months ago, where I was doing really good with controlling it. But the last 6 months, or even up to a year, it started to go a little downhill with my OCD. It gets harder and harder to control it because essentially what you have to do to keep on top of your control is you fight your OCD urges by doing like exactly what triggers you. And it makes like something in your brain go off where it actually causes you pain and like such an icky, uncomfortable feeling. It's like one way I describe to friends is like that uncomfortable feeling when nails to a blackboard or something that like sometimes triggers some of my friends is like, when you have a cutlery that like scrapes the side of the bowl and it's that like ugh icky feeling. Well, that's exactly what I get with OCD, but it's just like times 10, like intensity. So yeah, it can be hard because you have to do what triggers you in order to keep on top of that so it doesn't get worse next time. But it's meant in the last 6 months that I've had to like double my OCD medication. But it just means, yeah, so I've acknowledged that it was a good reminder that I'm going to have to do this my whole life. I'm going to have like up and downs with my control with my OCD. But I just have to like mold to whatever it's like, whether that's,
Go with it.
yeah, whether that's increasing or decreasing my medication.
Yeah.
Stuff
Can I
like
ask you,
that.
sorry, just out of interest, how do you know when to, there's reasons for me asking this, I won't go into it, but I'm just thinking about, we quite often are put on medication. And unless we come off the medication, how we would know whether we still need it or not.
Yeah.
That was just a question I had about, about my mum with her illness. But so for you, how do you know when you can adjust your medication? What are the signs and symptoms for you? How do you know that you can?
Yeah.
You talked about being up and down.
I mean, well, obviously I have like medication. I don't know if it's a psychologist or something. I can't remember the word. But I've had so much experience with medication and trialing medication over my whole life. So I'm very good at picking up when things need to be increased, because it's all chemically in the brain. Some things, for me, I've needed medical help with medication. And I've known like how that's had an impact on me, like good impact. And sometimes if it's not the right medication, like growing up, I'd know because it wasn't helping. And I could tell purely by if my OCD was doing better or if it was doing worse and how intense it was. So I just know, like, depending on how my OCD was, and also talking with like my doctors that do my medication, they're really experienced with other people that my age that take the same meds, so they also, knowing me, have good suggestions, and quite often we both think the same thing, like, oh, like, am I able to increase my meds? Yeah, I was going to suggest that, like, so yeah, I've had a lot of experience with it over my life, so I should go into medication. I should go into being a private doctor.
Maybe. So at school then, I'm sort of leading up to you being homeschooled. So I've read that you were bullied because of your disorder or disorders. Was there anything in particular that you were bullied for? What was the...
Yeah, most, because obviously I didn't know I had ADHD then and stuff. Definitely the OCD and Tourette's. I used to have trigger words when I was younger for OCD. In fact, I wasn't able to say them or anything until I was 16, maybe a bit older. And
So you couldn't say them yourself without triggering?
Yeah,
right.
And the effects that I'd get when I triggered myself, like I couldn't say I'll tell you these words, leading up the anticipation. Yeah, and they all have funny meanings. Why? These two words, like I couldn't say them, I couldn't spell them out loud, I couldn't think of them in my head. Otherwise, I'd go into like a severe like tic attack, just like ticking like physically all over, like just feeling that scraping, like the blackboard kind of feeling, icky feeling, just really triggering me. Quite often it would end up in like meltdowns on the ground. Right. If I was like thinking of these words over and over, if my little brother was teasing me with these words. I couldn't hear other people say them. And these two words are actually like so common. It's funny looking back at it now, but these two words were, I couldn't say love, and it had nothing to do with the meaning. Like it wasn't the affection or anything behind it. But I think, growing up, I don't know why that one, but from the age of like 5, I couldn't say it, but it still kind of was triggered by the age of like 4. But it meant that like my parents had to grow up. I had to grow up with my parents like never hearing me say like I love you, or you know what I mean. So it does
them not
affect
being able to say it to you.
Yeah, exactly. When I was singing when I was younger, you know how impossible it is to find a song that doesn't say love in it. So it was, I'd have to mold to that, and I might have like a singing competition when I was younger, and it would be kind of awkward because instead of saying the word love, I'd have to replace it with something like heart or like, and it was really weird. But then when I started going to a school which was like religious based, I started to like really get triggered by the word Jesus.
Could be a problem. Yeah.
So obviously going to like a religious school back when I was younger, that was impossible, right? And over the years it just got more severe, and I think it was because there was like a pressure of needing to constantly say that word or hearing it, or the pressure of needing to like, I don't know, pray or things like that at school, just kind of put like pressure with that word. It's so random. Like for me, it could have been any words, but it meant that I grew up and I had to endorse like hearing people constantly say the word, oh, I love like this book, or things like that. But it meant I constantly like, I'd be having a conversation, I'd just like be ticking, like little like spazzes going on. and it was hard to ignore. So that was hard with like socializing. Can't even remember where I was going with this, but now like I can say them, which is really good. But
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it took me years to train, and you know, I used to go to like these little like therapy sessions where they try and help me fight my OCD, but it wasn't until I was 15 and a half, because I didn't go to that anymore. Apparently I didn't qualify. Um, yeah. But it wasn't until I was like 15 and a half that I was able to do it myself. Um, yeah. But those were like the things that would go on at school, like kids saying these words because they found out that these would give me reactions. And so they go around, oh, come on, guys, let's say love and Jesus to Sophie. Oh, guys, don't you just love Jesus? Like, you know, like things like that. But then teachers just like, you know, oh, that child's my favorite in the class. They would never do that. They'd like say in front of the whole class, like, you're lying, Sophie. But yeah, but
Yeah.
it's
That's
good
not
to
helpful, is it?
it's good to sometimes let it away, because sometimes I can still hold on to it.
Yeah.
Like I still like think about it, and it still is stuck with me, because
Yeah.
that's who I am as a person. But sometimes I have to like make myself forget about it, because I get too into it if I'm having a conversation with someone who also had a bad experience with school.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, clearly you're able to say those words now, and I don't know whether
Yeah,
I don't know whether
had
it's
my life back.
yeah. Is medication helping with that, or is that a lot of you being able to control things, or both?
Medication plays a big part. For me, it was a little different with gaining my ability to have control. I think it's I know so many people with OCD and Tourette's, and I'm the only person in regards to the Tourette stuff that's been able to like over years stop my Tourette's. Like I haven't met anyone else. Like there's no clinical thing to how to stop or cure Tourette's. I've met hundreds of people with Tourette's. I'm the only one that's been able to do it, and a lot of it is for me because everyone's different. Not everyone needs medication. There's so many different meds out there, but for me, the meds I was on helped give me that ground base. But for me, I needed to decide to change, and it was all mental. But I think without that ground base of meds, I wouldn't have been able to get there. But yeah, I still think like, dang, like, should I go into like a science like study or something? Because there's like no one else out there that's been able to gain control. So it fascinates me because a lot of it was just a mental choice. Um, to be honest, for me, at the time I was going to church, and I needed that feeling of a higher power, feeling like I wasn't just in control, that there was someone else helping me. And at the time, like that worked for me. Like, just being honest, like I don't go now, but that like was what I needed. That feeling of there's actually someone else in control, and that was enough for me to like literally 1 second, like I had control. Like it's crazy to think how powerful our minds are. But yeah, I think everyone's different. But it's still so like crazy to think about.
Mm.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really interesting.
it is interesting. It really is. Yeah. So thank you for sharing all of this. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
of
it.
course.
Um, in relation to the bullying side of things, right? Because there are a lot of people who get bullied at school,
Yeah.
and and for a lot of different reasons. So maybe moving forward a little bit to the time when it was obviously getting too much. I mean, I was going to say kids can be mean. Kids are just kids, right? And
Yeah,
but they
yeah,
don't realize the
yeah.
impact that they're having, and it's
Especially
quite
when
significant, right?
Yeah, especially when they don't grow up with OCD and all that. They don't know. Like, it's easy to, I mean, now I don't hold grudges towards like any of the kids because, um, heck, like if I didn't have Tourette's, like I wouldn't like know what it is. Like, is it even real? Like, you know, any of those things without those experiences or without knowing people with them, it doesn't make sense, right? So I have no blame towards them. I guess the harder part was the lack of like doing anything on behalf of like the teachers or things like that, which was more important, and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
So can you maybe, I don't want you to necessarily relive this, but I think it's
It's okay.
important to share how it feels to be bullied,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Just in general terms.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not so sure whether there'll be many kids that listen to this or not.
Mm.
But if there are, for instance, if there are parents who've got kids, it's
Mm.
worth sharing with, you know, and like you said, like I think, this conversation so far has been about understanding
Mm-hmm.
and having knowledge. If kids knew the impact they were having, I'm sure most of them anyway wouldn't do what they were doing if they really
Yeah.
truly understood.
Yeah.
Because most of them are good kids. They're not necessarily
Yeah.
getting the impact that they're doing. Some of them, don't get me wrong, I probably
Yeah.
would still do it. But I think in the main, people are generally good on the inside, and
Yeah.
if they had better understanding, they might choose differently. So I
Yeah.
just wonder if you'd share with us what it feels like
Mm-hmm.
to be bullied and the impacts of
Yeah.
that.
I think everyone's had that feeling of being bullied, whether it's your sibling or someone bigger and tougher than you in like sport, or someone that says mean things. Like everyone has gone through that, I'm sure. Um, yeah, I think it's hard to make like a child understand when they're at that like level of growth. I mean, you could make a child sit down and watch a documentary about Tourette's, but you know, until they actually understand, I think you need that level of maturity, just to understand how it can affect people. Yeah, it's trying to think. ADHD moment.
It's all right.
ADHD
That's all right.
moment.
No, what I was asking was how did it feel for you? Like I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's like we've said, understanding what Tourette's is, and I think where you were going there, maybe Sophie, correct me if I'm wrong, is that younger kids aren't necessarily going to understand even if you explain
Yeah,
them,
yeah,
right? But
yeah.
just the fact that people are different and that there's something going on for them is all they need to know really to make a choice about whether they should
Yeah, that's true.
pick on them or bully them for whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it might be nothing. It might just be the wrong time, wrong place, wrong person type of thing. But I was thinking about, how does it feel being bullied like that? You're quite right. I think everyone's experienced what it feels like momentarily
Yeah.
to be bullied or put in your place by someone or feel not so good about a situation. But when it's happening day in, day out,
Yes.
what's
Yeah.
the impact of that?
Yeah. I think if I was trying to like explain to a child, like obviously the odd thing that kind of knocks you down, you have time to build yourself back up. But when it's every single day, um, it's keeping you at like a certain level of being like knocked down, yeah, and the impacts can be like crazy. Like obviously they're added to my anxiety, and when my anxiety's worse, it makes my OCD worse, which makes my Tourette's worse because it's all like connected. Yeah, it got to the point where we had to be taken out of school, obviously. But yeah, like very isolating. I couldn't sit and eat lunch with anyone because kids, I'd sit down and then they'd all stand up and leave. So it is, you know, yeah. But I think like, yeah, again, it's hard to like make kids properly understand unless they go through something like that themselves. But obviously, I guess they'll learn sympathy and stuff as they get older. But I think it's more so the parents' job to try and make their kids understand, or to have like genuine like one-on-one conversations with them, or just I think I don't know. I think how everyone's raised, they all have like a level of sympathy based on um, how they're raised, like whether they're raised around animals, um, whether they're raised maybe in I don't know, a slaughter farm. I don't know. I think that it's down to like the person. But I think a parent definitely has a job of just, as they're being raised, teaching them sympathy, and then with that comes like understanding. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Talking of parents, what was the toll on your parents when you were, obviously, if you were bullied at school and you were having a hard time of it, and it was, like you say, it was a knock-on effect for these conditions that you've got, these
Yeah,
disorders. You know, that was taking its toll on you
yeah,
in a big way. I imagine, and mum's here,
mm,
um, I imagine that that would have taken a toll on your parents too,
yeah.
knowing that you were feeling that way at school.
Yeah, definitely, because not only were they having to deal with our issues at home, once we were at school, which was when they were having a break, their kids were then going through like so much, and it wasn't a safe place for us. So then they were also having the stress of like, they're not able to get that safe space, time to themselves, uh, with sending us to like a place that's supposed to be a safe space, because it's not like a safe space for us. So then it like resulted in homeschooling, and then because then like I don't know, just another ADHD moment. I think I'm due my
Yeah,
ADHD
yeah.
meds.
But so it would have taken had an impact on the whole family.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
obviously, moving to homeschooling was a
Uh-huh.
decision that your parents made.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what was that? What was that like? Moving the transition of no longer going to school and being homeschooled, was there a sense of relief there? Was there a sense of disappointment that you were not going to be with
Relief.
friends? Relief. Yeah.
Relief, because I only really had one friend anyway at school, but because I'm such, like, I've always been a very social kid, always been doing like gymnastics like 4 days a week when I was training, because I was training like really long hours because gymnastics was my thing. You know, uh, fun homeschool choir things, like going to homeschool groups. Like, my parents knew without a doubt that I would not have any trouble with socializing. Um, so for me, it was such a relief. But it was really funny, because when we look back at it, like my mum and I and my brother Malachi, um, the first year out of school when we were homeschooling, my mum really tried to stick to um, the learning structure. So she like made this classroom in our garage, and our garage was so cold, and she'd be like, okay guys, she like ordered all these expensive like Ministry of Education books for us, and obviously back then none of us knew that that's not how we learn. Oh, medication alarm going off, I'll just delete that.
Do you need to have a break?
Oh no, it's fine.
Okay.
I'll take one later. It'll take ages to kick in anyway.
Okay.
um, yeah, it was funny because we'd like be put in our like classroom. It was very cold, and we'd have to finish a certain amount of units before we could have lunch. So it meant that we were locked in this classroom and we weren't allowed any food until we'd done our units, which obviously we were just like drawing things. And I've actually looked back at these books, and it's so funny. The shit I wrote in them just so that I could fill up the pages. But it was stuff like, how did Stacy enjoy her lunch? Well, she ate it, didn't she? Duh. Like a bunch of attitudes. Like, that was so funny. Oh, there's some really like worrying, like, I don't know if I was mentally stable, just the random shit that I wrote in the books. But so clearly that didn't work. And then we really went into for us, because all three of us siblings, we're very sensory based. Like, I'm diagnosed with sensory processing disorder. So very much like fluffy things, just like feelings, like textures, colors. So we went to like kind of like a unschooled point of view, which was really cool, because we were doing life skill stuff that we needed to grow with, because I think, there's a lot of studies about how kids with their child development need that kind of that play and that sensory-based learning kind of stuff. And because we're on the spectrum, we needed a lot more of that. So we kind of had we had what we needed a little bit earlier on, but it meant that we grew so much in social skills. Like the middle child, he struggled a while with social skills, but through that, it was just like so much better for him and I. We also learned like things with, you know, the amount of animals we had. With that came, you know, what was the word I was using before? Like compassion for things, like just because,
Empathy.
yeah, empathy. And then we'd go to homeschool groups, and again with the socializing, and you know, we'd do our math by going to the supermarket and, oh, what's the cheapest thing? How's it going to add up to? Like, that was the stuff that we needed. But we also learned a lot about what we wanted to do, like who we were as people, because it didn't feel like we were in a boundary, like our personalities like blossomed maybe too much, but because we weren't in like a super structural place, you know, obviously you need that like grounds structure. Us, all right. But yeah.
I'd like to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors. I'm really pleased to announce that we have Sharp New Zealand as a sponsor. And it's great to have Sharp on board because as a customer, I can speak about their products and services from personal experience. And it feels good to be able to endorse and recommend a company because of the level of satisfaction we have regarding the services they provide. And across my businesses, we've certainly been impressed with the care and collaboration we've experienced in our dealings with Sharp. It's certainly a brand that we trust. Sharp has a long history of creating breakthrough products designed to meet the needs of people living in New Zealand. Sharp's leadership in technology innovation ensures it's at the forefront of the pack, providing business solutions from printing and photocopying to interactive meeting solutions and ICT phone systems. No matter where you are or what size your organisation, whether you're large or small, Sharp New Zealand can provide their services to you nationwide. If you're looking to upgrade your technology or renew your photocopier leases, talk to your local Sharp team or visit the website at sharp.net.nz. So, what I was going to ask, Sophie, was when I read that you'd been homeschooled, my stereotypical kind of perspective on that was that I can understand the reasons for that, but maybe there'll be social implications. But what you've been describing is that maybe you were thriving more being out of a very social environment at school, which for a variety of reasons you've described were not that great. Working at home or being schooled at home, you had the opportunities to maybe socialize in different and better ways, and you maybe grew during that time. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. Like, there's two factors for that, I think. And growing with my personality and understanding who I am as a person. And then also, like, you know, not having that judgment around whilst I, like, kind of discover who I am. And the second one was the social groups that I was going to, like the homeschool programs. They were all environments with kids very much like me who weren't automatically judgy and decided who they were friends with and who they weren't. So there were no limitations, which meant that I was able to be confident, which then obviously helped with my singing and my performing and me making friends as I get older, you know.
Yeah. So no, that's really cool. It's a really good insight for me.
Cool.
I've learned a lot today already, and that's something
Yeah.
valuable for me.
Totally.
So then, well, that's a nice segue, by the way, into talking about your
Cool.
singing.
Thank you. You like what I did there?
And writing. And so, when for you, when did that become a thing? How long have you been singing for, and when did you kind of decide that that's something you wanted to do?
Well, I liked singing, and I started doing songwriting when I had my 9th birthday. I was given like a notebook, so I started writing in there. I might give you a little bit of my first song that I wrote. Yeah, but I liked singing when I was about 8. but I wanted to do a solo in the school thing, but I kept like trying to have confidence, and by the time like after like 10 seconds, the lady was like, "Oh well, you're just gonna go in the back of the choir." So that was fine though. Yeah, so when I was 9, I started like writing little songs that I came up with. That's when I started, but then there was like a long period of when I didn't. After that, I got into musical theatre, which was kind of like my passion for music, and I found it. Local theatre, doing shows that added a lot to my personality because I was doing a lot of acting stuff. And being on the spectrum, I was and I still am very expressive, like very out there. Like I will add on American accents and shit just to like hype up whatever I'm saying, you know? So that like just added to my personality. And I met a lot of other people who are creative, and generally people that are creative are also on some sort of spectrum. So that was really cool. And then I started, learning guitar when I was probably like 15. And then I just kind of got just piece by piece, a little taste of different parts of the local music scene. With the confidence that I had through theatre as well, I started doing just random things. I'd be at places where they'd have singers in a stage, and I'd just go up the back and just be like, "Hey, can I get on stage and sing?" Like, I never like booked gigs, but I would just ask them, and then some of them like would be like, "Oh yeah, okay." They'd let me on, and then I'd sing like Hallelujah, and the backing band were like, "Oh, we know that song, we'll do it." So just little things like that, where I'd get up spontaneously. Um, then I started to like just understand my passion, but it took a while for me to kind of step back from the theatre stuff and realize the stuff that I wanted to do as like a solo artist, if you like. Um, and I didn't even really see it as like a solo artist thing. I just wanted to create music. Um, and fortunately, I found through doing a gig, I found my now manager. He was like recruiting. He was trying to find people to do music with, and that was like December 2019. And then fast forward to December 2020, we released my first song on Spotify called Insane. You guys can check it out if you want. Sophie-Maude Spotify. Um, yeah. And then a year after that, I started to actually do, or like half a year after that, I started to work with a producer in his studio doing songwriting sessions. And that's when I started to get a taste for being like a recording artist, doing it as a potential career. And then I guess just as time went on, more and more people backed me who genuinely like believed that I could do it. And then I was like, oh, maybe I can actually do this as like a job. Yeah. And now with like things that I've accomplished, I actually like think like if I actually work really hard, that there's a possibility to actually do it.
Absolutely.
I've like my last single, I just released one now, but the one before that got to #1 on the Kiwi singles chart, which was really cool. So just little things like that.
Not little, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. But things like that make me realize like, oh, like I actually am in a position where I have a big enough platform and people around me to help, that now it's just up to me to actually keep it going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
World's your oyster.
Yeah.
Was this not something that, in your childhood you dreamed of doing, or, what did you want to do actually? Did you have any ideas?
Yeah. There's lots of things that I have as a passion. Lots of things even now that I could easily do as like a part-time job or career. But my dream very much being like a competitive gymnast was going to like worlds, going to Olympics. And you know, if I actually like stuck to that, maybe I could have. I had people in my team that are now doing that stuff, competing, which is really cool. I even had this guy when I was about 5 trying to convince my parents to move up to Auckland and for me to train with him in like the top gym sport of the country. But we didn't do it, which is probably good because otherwise I wouldn't do music.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like, you know, our life kind of just constantly goes through paths. And I acknowledge and accept that there's a chance, and it would obviously be if I didn't put enough into it, but there's a chance that I might not do music, might not work out, it might be too stressful, you know. But there's so many things that I love to do, which again with homeschooling I kind of found out that I like I'll be sweet, like I'll be all good as long as I'm just happy, like doing whatever I'm doing as long as I'm happy. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great attitude to have, eh?
Yeah.
Because I think no matter how good you are or how much you want something,
Yeah.
there are things that are beyond your control, right?
Yeah.
But I think, you know, from what I hear and what I've read, you're certainly on the right path, aren't you? That's for sure.
I am due to like the support of people around me. Yeah, it now just comes down to my work because that'll be the only thing that slows me down.
And people are supporting you because they can see the talent that you've got and the potential that you've got, right? You wouldn't have that support if you weren't bringing something, you know, to the table, right? So don't undersell yourself. So I think
Thank you.
whatever you do, you'll be amazing at.
Thank you.
Can I talk about your songwriting? I'm interested in this, to be honest with you. Couple of things. Well, I'll get to, you know, the songs that you've written. You can talk about those in a second. But what's the process for you? I'm interested because
Yeah.
I secretly don't tell anyone. But I've always
Sing in the
fancied myself. Well, I do, yeah. Until I get told to shut up.
I get the same thing.
I've always liked the idea of being a songwriter, a lyricist, or whatever you call it, right? But like I said, I think before we started this interview, I don't have a kind of musical bone in my body. I love music.
Have you
I love
actually
songs.
sat down and have you actually tried to write a song?
No, I haven't.
I think you'll find that there is a musical part in your body you just have not discovered yet.
Maybe. I mean, I've written poetry and other stuff, but I've not. I think the thing is for me, and this is why you can maybe answer this question for me, is I wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. The thing that I've got, the barrier is, do the words come first or do you get a tune first? Or, you know, like I can make up words to existing tunes and songs, but I can't imagine how to write words that, you know, would eventually have a tune that goes with it. So what's your process?
Yeah, I know what you mean because you can look at a finished product of a song and be like, dang, like, what is the process behind, like, even not just the song, not like the singing and the melody, but also the backing track, like all the little and like things in the backing track. It's just everything. It's hard to break it apart, right? But I'm gonna give you a challenge. I'm gonna tell you some songwriting tips, and I want you to go home later and try and write a song.
All right then.
You can, you might not. I don't know. But
I'm up for a challenge.
Yes, okay, sounds good. So really, there's not like any rules. There's different types of structures, but it all comes down to what you come up with at the time. Like for me, it can be different. I might have a melody in my head that I like just made up without thinking about it, and I'll be like, oh, this will be cool as a song. I'll just record it on my voice memos on my phone, and then when I'm in a songwriting mood, I'll sit down on my piano, which I'm like, I can't properly play. By the way, I just come up with a few things, send it to my producer, and then he actually does the real work. But then when you come up with a melody, right, there's like a cadence. There's like, syllables, like if this is a song I already know, it's already real, but you might do there's so many ways you could do that melody, like you know, you start to come up with a pattern with that melody, and with that pattern you just randomly say random words that might come to mind. Somebody else, with that like somebody else, it comes with like a vibe. You might feel like it's a happy song, a heartbreak song. You might feel like you're on an island, like you have to visualize everything. And with that 1 or 2 words you come up with, you start to form a sentence based off those words. And it might not be the vibe, so you change it later on. But with that, you start to form a bit of structure. When you might work on that melody, you have to try and add to that melody with another melody that kind of matches that one. You might like times it by 2. Once you get like, for that one little part of melody, once you get like a sentence, then you know what your next sentence will be about, like based off what the first one's about. And then you have like a verse, and then you can work on a chorus based off like the melody could be the same kind of key that the first one is, so it's not like random notes. Yeah, I'm just giving you everything. But, but then I might sit down and want to write a song. I might go to poetry things. If I'm you, I might go into like things that rhyme and things. And then I might have a bunch of stuff written down that rhymes and that would fit in the same time, like frame of each other. And then I just come up with a random melody, put it on top. The thing is, like, you might not like this melody, or you might feel like you can do so much better. But as long as you continue it and you finish a part of the song, or you finish a song, you can then go back and change it. One thing I've learned, and a lot of people struggle with, is if I keep working at this one tiny portion of this song that I have yet to write, because I can't find the melody that I really want, the reality is I don't end up finishing the song and I lose interest and I move on, because what I actually need to do is just, even if I don't like it that much, finish that part. So then I get to the next part of the song. I might write something I really like, then I can go back to the part I didn't like and change it. But you have like an advantage with your poetry, right? You've already got words written down. You can come up with a melody, and then you might change those words, but at least you've got the base of a melody. Yeah, there's so many ways. It's however you feel like, what you feel like doing next, now that you know a few of the little steps. Awesome. It's whatever you feel like doing, whatever you can get creative with. Yeah. Watch some YouTube videos.
Awesome. Thank you for that. No, that's really cool. So what you were explaining there as well, something came to mind. So not getting stuck on a bit and working at it until you've got it perfect. It's actually moving on and being willing to come back to it, right? Rather than constraining your creative thinking. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you got to keep the flow. Otherwise, you don't end up finishing that part and you move on because you get bored.
Yeah, true. So for you, we'll get to performing in a second, but what's the best part, the songwriting or the performing?
It depends how I songwrite. Sometimes I songwrite on my own, but there's nothing I love more than songwriting with my producer in like studio, and then having like our friend who also does songwriting, like things like that, how there's just a bunch of minds getting creative. Like, I love songwriting when there's a backing track being produced. So if I'm doing it on my own in like my house, so this is why I'm starting to learn a little bit about production now, so that I can start creating like even like shit sounding backing tracks. It's just to get the process of it. But I might be trying to songwrite on my piano, but I can't hear the bigger picture, how it would sound as a backing track, because I'm only hearing it as piano. But when I'm in a songwriting studio, the track's being developed as we're songwriting, so I can actually hear the beats and envision the finished product, so that I'm coming up with all this stuff, and then my producer will be like, wait, what if you do this? And I'll be like, yo, how about this? Like, just constantly flowing within ideas. And then there's the fun part of, sweet, we've written this part of the song, quickly hit in the booth, quickly record this so we have it written down, we don't forget. Then you're back out of the booth and you go back to writing, and then you're like, oh, let's try and do some stuff with this backing track, add some like bass, and really cool. So I love that. Don't get me wrong, I love standing on a stage with everyone looking at me. But I love that feeling, that adrenaline of getting creative. I do love the atmosphere of a studio, but it is my job to be able to do it anywhere. Like, I can't limit myself in just doing it in a studio, because that's what I've done for a while, but I'm trying to now, actually songwrite on your own, Sophie. You're supposed to be able to do this, and I know I can. But yeah.
But there is something, I think, energizing and powerful and motivational with working with other people, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So performing then. Talk to me about that. I read that you were more confident as a performer once you were homeschooled. I think
Oh
that your
yeah, I
confidence
wouldn't
went
have
through
been
the
able to
roof.
stand on stage. I wasn't even able to like put my hand up in class. I
Right.
would not have been able to stand on stage.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm interested, in with your background and your story of being at school, being bullied, dealing with the ASD and the other things you've talked about. For me, it seems very courageous and brave, having not, fully understood, the conditions that you've been dealing with before. Again, just having that kind of outside perspective, I'm like getting up on stage and performing. I mean, it seems like a big leap, but is that something that you find easy to do? Is it good for you to do that?
Yeah. Over time, I've like gotten used to it through theatre. We'd do shows, you know, some shows we've done like in Bay Court and they've been like 3 weeks back to back and you're on stage in front of hundreds of people every night. So you get used to that, being able to process that. I think that's the hardest part, depending on how big the audience is. Like last Christmas, 2022, trying to remember what year it is, I was really happy to be a part of Christmas in the Park, Auckland, which was like the biggest performance I've probably sung in front of. There's probably like, I don't know, 20 to 30,000 people there at that time, I think. And then at the end, there was probably like 80,000 or I don't 50,000 or something like that. Yeah. Torrential rain as well. Yeah. So people, I was covered under the stage, but the people like watching the audience were dedicated. Yeah, that was like, you get used to acknowledging that you don't process the amount of people that are watching you, but it's getting used to the fact that you don't process it. You're just there, you're in a character, you have switched into your confident self, but you just love that rush of adrenaline. Yeah, I guess it takes someone that enjoys that adrenaline, that it doesn't make them feel sick, and then you're fine on stage. Yeah, it's just being able to acknowledge that you don't process the amount of people that are like looking at you, but still being able to like remember your words, remember, where I'm walking on stage, at what point of the song, and where I'm dancing, I love it though, very much.
Sounds really cool.
Yeah.
You're braver than I am.
You've got it in you.
You've got to be
Everyone has.
Got to be performing on stage next for a song I haven't written yet. But
anyway, yeah, it's true.
So how does your ADHD and things like that? How do you manage that when you've got a performance? Is that something you consciously need to manage in order to be able to prepare and actually execute?
I have to take my meds because if I'm on stage, like I could very easily forget my lyrics just because I'm struggling to process how many people are in the audience or things like that. Like, wow, there's a lot of people looking at me right now. Or I might just like get lost. I tend to, if I don't take my meds, sometimes if I do take my meds, but this is why I need my meds. If I'm on stage, I always go almost like an out of body experience because my body is physically like performing, like blah, blah, blah. But my mind is just like, I wonder what I'm having for tea tonight. Like, I'm not even there. Like, when you're reading and your eyes are physically looking at the book, but your mind is like up there. Yep. That's what I'm doing when I'm singing. But if I don't have my meds, I go too far away. And then all of a sudden I forgot like where I'm at, like where I'm up to in the song or the next lyrics.
Yeah, yeah. And does that, create some anxiety for you?
It does. That's why I have to take my meds because otherwise I know that it could happen. Yeah. And so, but otherwise I'm fine. There's always a bit of anxiety, but not anxiety, just a rush of adrenaline. I guess the only anxiety I get before performing isn't the fact that I'm in front of loads of people because I love that. but just the anxiety that I'm going to drift away and forget lyrics. But I'm usually fine. Like I'm with a theatre background, I'm very good at improvising on the spot. So I'm always able to like back myself up if it comes to it.
Fantastic.
Which is good.
So obviously that's a driver for you. You enjoy performing. I've read about that. You've said that today. Is this, where do you see your career going? What does it look like for you? If all things go your way, which way do you want it to go?
Yeah. I guess my view of whereabouts, because it could be successful on this path, this path, this path, this path, this path. It just depends like which path I want to go down, and how much work I put in. But for me now, because I'm sure it'll change as I get to different like destinations and goals and stuff, now I just want to be able to, because I usually have current goals, I want to be able to, at the moment, because it's like a business, right? My music is like a business. It's full on, like the music side of it's actually this like the smallest part. It's actually all the stuff around it. But I want to be able to be successful in like the aspect of being able to get an income from it. Yeah, I think all musicians, most, have to have a side job anyway of like income because it's just so expensive. But just being able to make money from it, so that because everything that I make at the moment, I just put back into my music pot. Like I don't keep any of it to myself. I just keep adding to the pot. But what I'd like to be able to do is not have to put back into the pot, like start to make a bit of a living from it. I want to be like a public figure in New Zealand would be really cool, kind of like LAB, Benny, like these artists that I look up to, like Paige, like not to the point where you're like hauled on the streets and like, you can't go anywhere, but I'd love to be someone that people know and they might not know me, but they'll see me walking on the street and they just say hi to me. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Someone that obviously encourages people as well, especially people on the spectrum and stuff. Just encourages people to like go for like their goals, because literally one thing I've realized is you actually can do what you want to do. It's actually like doing the little steps towards it and having like support around you, but you literally can do it. Yeah, I also just want to be doing all the makeup. See, now I'm saying random. All the songs that I could come up with, all the songs that I want to be doing, I want to be making them and releasing them, and I want to be like touring around and doing shows without having to like, because it's so stressful now being, a new artist and not having like all the finances behind that you could do with. It would just be great to be able to do these shows regularly. Just be up there in the industry, like working alongside people that I look up to now. Just for the fun of being creative with someone that you look up to who's also very creative. I think that would be really cool. I've had a little taste of what could be to come of the industry, and just being able to like talk to people that I've always really idolized, other people that are higher in the music industry in New Zealand, like it's giving me such like a motivation to like keep going, like, oh, like I have the privilege and not a lot of people do to like talk to these people that inspire me, giving me a bit of motivation to like keep going and keep like being able to kind of be in the same space or talk to these people that that I look up to, all this stuff.
That's pretty cool, eh?
Yeah, it's
pretty
so
cool to meet people that inspire you.
Yeah, literally. People that like other people like, love their music, or like idols they look up to as well. Just like having this little bit like closer, or like now that I'm in the music kind of industry, means that I'm just one step closer to all like of my idols, and I'm kind of at a place where I can kind of talk to some of them, which is really cool. It just keep wanting to crawl away.
Well, that's good. That's what you've got to keep doing, isn't it? Keep focused on where you're heading and keep moving in that direction.
What I can do as well to keep me, because
Yeah.
people around me can only do so much.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. So what you talked about your songs. I've listened to some of your songs on, like you said, on Spotify, and watched your videos on YouTube.
Awesome.
All pretty cool. What is it you like to write about? What have you? Can you write about anything, or do you like to kind of have a focus?
It depends. Sometimes I'll sit down and be like, I don't know what I'm writing, but I will start with a melody and it will go from there. Other times I'll be like, I want to write about a specific song. I feel like I haven't touched I haven't touched on this kind of emotion in my other songs, so I want to focus on that. With my latest song that came out, Goosebumps, I've never done this before and finished a song, but I was like in the bath, and you know when you get goosebumps, I was like, yelled out for my mum, oh, Mum, can you quickly text me the word goosebumps? I think it'd be cool to like have a song that's titled Goosebumps. So I started from there, and I went to the studio and I was like, let's write a song about goosebumps. And then we're like, oh, like what kind of emotions do you get when you get goosebumps? Could you have like something where you look at someone that you like and you get goosebumps? Like, you know, like there's no rules. Like it depends how I'm feeling. It honestly depends how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, we get goosebumps in our house. We call them goosies when we listen to people like you sing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. You know, it just has that effect on people. Music does have a massive effect on people, right?
Yeah, I think it's funny because my dad and my mum, they'll be listening to some like old singer or something, and they'll be like, oh, it's giving me goosebumps. But it's funny. I think I've only ever gotten like, and this isn't because people don't impress me. People impress me a lot, but I've never had goosebumps from someone impressing me. I think I've only had it once, but I might have just been cold. But it's funny that like there's loads of people that actually physically get goosebumps when something like, you know, makes their hair stand up, like something that they're like wowed about. But I've never like actually had that, which is really funny.
Yeah.
I get emotional, spiritual goosebumps when I hear someone singing amazingly.
Well, Sophie, I'd like to thank you for your time and your openness and honesty about your life, your character, as well as giving all the secrets away about how to write songs. I'll be honest with you. I don't know that I'm going to be any good, even though you've given me that, but I do appreciate that.
Thank you.
It's great to be talking to you now. Before you're too big a star and we can't fit into your schedule.
You can always book me in for another podcast sesh, dude.
Well, that would be good. That would be good. And we will, because I'm sure that in the not too distant future, you're going to continue to rise as a star in New Zealand and beyond, I've no doubt. So I'd just like to say as well, I think, you know, with the things that you, and I don't, please don't take this in a condescending way or anything like that, but given what your story and your background and all the things that you've been dealing with, I think it's amazing that you are who you are today, sitting in front of me, being so articulate and open about these things and sharing. You'd be a great advocate for young people who are dealing with those things. And like you, I think you said earlier, you know, you're proof that you can actually do what you want to do. No matter what the constraints are. So I think you're a great role model for anyone, but especially young people.
Thank you.
You've got a great story to tell, and I'm grateful for you sharing it with us today.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you. Cheers. As you all hopefully know by now, if you've seen other episodes, this segment of the podcast is all about wisdom worth sharing from our guests who have been living a life that is a story worth retelling. At the end of every interview, I look back as part of the editing process and discover some of the gems that came out during the conversation, and I summarise them here. Now, I have to admit that before meeting Sophie-Maude, I was a little bit apprehensive about the interview. Not because I didn't think her story was worth retelling. I knew that it was. But I was a little bit insecure about interviewing someone so young, whether I could relate. But primarily it was about talking about things that I knew very little about, such as the autistic spectrum disorders. I'm one of these people who can easily put my foot in it, and often do. And with matters like this, I was nervous of doing so. But I think that's part of the issue though, isn't it? Those of us who've never had anything to do with or have been diagnosed with any kind of disorder like that, or we don't have anyone close to us who has, we know very little about it, which can make us nervous or blissfully ignorant and potentially hurtful. If we knew a bit more, maybe life for everyone would be a little bit easier. After meeting Sophie and Mum Sarah, I knew a bit more, but importantly, I knew that I needed to know a little bit more still. So I'm going to continue to find out as much as I can about these disorders for everybody's benefit. I'm going to have to start again. I don't know what it is with the pace of it. It just seems like it's either too fucking slow or too fast. I know, but normally, like if I put space, where I've got spaces like that, then I have to wait for it. Yeah, fuck it. Okay. I think it's just I'm not in the right headspace. I think that's what it is. It's not the auto cue's fault. It's mine. As you will hopefully know by now, if you've seen other episodes, this segment of the podcast is all about wisdom worth sharing from our guests who have been living a life that is a story worth retelling. At the end of every interview, I look back as part of the editing process and discover some of the gems that came out during the conversation and summarize them here. Now, I have to admit that before meeting Sophie-Maude, I was a little bit apprehensive about the interview. Not because I didn't think Sophie's story was worth retelling. I knew that it was. But I was a little insecure about interviewing someone so young and whether I could relate. But primarily, it was to do with talking about things that I knew very little about, such as autistic spectrum disorders. Now, I'm one of those people who can easily put my foot in it, and often do, and with matters like this, I was nervous about doing so. But maybe that's part of the issue. Those of us who've never been diagnosed with such disorders, or we don't know anyone close to us who has, we know very little about it, which can make us nervous, or we can be blissfully ignorant and potentially hurtful. If I knew a bit more, maybe life for everyone would be a bit easier. And after meeting Sophie and her mum Sarah, I do know a little bit more now, but importantly, I know that there's a lot more to find out still. So I'm going to continue on that journey. Anyway, regarding the interview, I needn't have worried about the interviewing Sophie. The confidence that she had when she walked into the studio was amazing. Instead of me doing so with her, she put me at ease, saying I could ask anything and that there was no such thing as a stupid question. Now, of course, when I'm around, there is, and I usually ask at least one. But in this interview, it felt just so easy, so natural, and just as I'd always intended and hoped for them to be. It was just a conversation between two people genuinely interested in chatting and sharing their thoughts. I was moved by Sophie's heartfelt story of dealing with multiple disorders on the autistic spectrum. And I was also entertained by her humour and the joyful way in which she told her story. It could have been a story full of woe and misery, with Sophie being the victim. And don't get me wrong, some of that story did make my eyes a bit blurry, thinking about that poor child suffering that way, being picked on about her condition and making it worse by the actions of kids at school. But Sophie didn't give the impression she was a victim. In fact, it was the opposite. She forgives those kids and she loves who she is. She loves the fact that she's on the spectrum, she says, because it makes her different. It gives her a different perspective. And rather than view this as something that could hold her back, blocking opportunities that mothers may have, she uses her uniqueness as a superpower to do things only others could dream of. This not only enables her to be creative, but it gives her the strength to put herself out there in front of thousands of people, performing her own songs on stage. Given the disorders that Sophie has been diagnosed with, ASD, OCD, ADHD, anxiety, Tourette's, and sensory integration disorder, she could be forgiven for not wanting to perform on stage, but she does it. And she does it extremely well. She's a fantastic young singer and songwriter, an amazing talent, and I'm looking forward to following her journey and seeing where she goes. I suspect she'll be a big star in the not-too-distant future. What stood out for me in her story was how formal diagnosis was not devastating for her, but it was a relief. Being diagnosed meant that not only could Sophie access medication that helps her, but it set her free. She could now understand herself and work out how to live with her disorders rather than be a prisoner to them. I know that this is not always possible in some extreme cases of such disorders, so I'm not suggesting here that it's just a matter of attitude for everyone. What I am saying is, as a young girl who was bullied and humiliated at school, she could have easily stayed quiet and shy and in the background, not wanting to be noticed, not drawing attention to herself. But she chose to step out from the shadows and become a rising star. With the diagnosis, parents could also get the help that they needed, and they could understand their daughter better and learn how to provide her what she needed to thrive, which included homeschooling. I have to admit that this story changed my stereotypical view on homeschooling. It didn't, as I would have suspected, create social problems for Sophie. Instead, it gave her the confidence to grow and be who she is, which led to a much better social relationships and experience than she was having at school. Being willing to be open and transparent about her disorders meant that Sophie's friends could also understand her and learn how to work with her instead of them fighting against each other through ignorance and frustration. It also helps Sophie be selective about friends, because those who don't want to understand, well, they're not worth wasting time on. Listening to Sophie's story created a question for me. In the leadership space, I teach that leading's about caring, and that to care we must be aware of the people and their needs so that we can work together in the best possible ways. It's extremely likely that our schools, workplaces, sports teams and community groups are full of people with autistic spectrum disorders. Some say, and Sophie did herself, we're all on the spectrum to a lesser or greater degree. So how useful would it be for us all to have a greater understanding of how we all function and what we all need? Well, I think it could be life-changing. It could enhance our workplace cultures, enhance our education outcomes, and our teams and our community groups could thrive if we just knew each other a little bit better. I'm not sure how feasible that really is, but it's a question worth asking, surely. So I think I will. As a result of this conversation, my family and I are already looking at how can we get assessed, because we think it could be invaluable. As well as being an amazing musical talent, don't forget to check out Sophie-Maude's Spotify account, by the way. Some fantastic songs on there. Sophie's a storyteller who can teach us all a thing or two about taking time to understand, about forgiveness, and being willing to open up and share for the benefit of others. In my view, Sophie has a beautiful mind. It may have troubled her as a child and still gives her challenges now, but it's also made her who she is today, a confident, intelligent, and articulate young person who knows what makes her happy, so she chooses to do that. Hopefully, you've been able to take away many insights from this interview that you can apply in some aspect to your life, work, and legacy. Use it, share it with others. As I always say, sharing is like teaching, and teaching helps us retain what we've learned and commit to change, which is necessary if we are to enhance our own life's work. I hope that you're happy, safe, and successful in all that you do. And remember, live a life that's a story worth retelling. I'm Steve Worsley, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Life's Work, the podcast all about wisdom worth sharing.